I'm super excited to introduce to you my new motorcycle for the 2025 season. This is a 2024 KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, and if you followed the channel for a little bit, you know that I've had a few more KTMs before that. This is actually number 4 for me out of the Super Adventure lineup. Now I've made a few changes, some obvious ones as you can see, and a few other changes and accessories that I added to the bike. So this video is all about the accessories and the modifications that I've made. So let's get started. What's up my biker friends, and welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to talk to you about all the modifications that I've made to the bike. Obviously there's a few obvious ones and there's a few not so obvious ones. For those guys that follow the channel for a little longer know that I've had a few KTMs before. The very first one that I had was a 1290 Super Adventure S, so the street bias model. And then when I started riding off-road or more off-road, I added a few more modifications to the bikes, and I also changed from the S to the R model. So this is my third R model in the 1290 lineup, and there's a few accessories that I've taken from sort of even the very first bike that I had, and a few accessories that I've sort of added to the mix, and a few things that just fell away because I didn't need them anymore or I found better options. So I'm going to go into all these changes and address that as I'm going through sort of the modifications that I've made. Let's start with the most prominent and visually obvious changes that I've made to the bike, and that's the graphics kit. If you know the channel, my previous bike, and it was the same model, this is a 2024 model, the previous one was a 2022 model, so kind of like the same bike, but it had white graphics on it, and I really love the white. I still like it a lot, but this is a new bike, so I wanted something different, and I went with the sort of more classic black, silver, orange accents on the bike. Also, these are completely custom made. The previous graphics kit that I've used are just kind of off the shelf, and there's plenty of choices out there, but I wanted something custom made. I also wanted the Moto vibes sort of on the bike across the tank, and this is made by Scrubdesignz. I think they're from Slovakia. They're quite nice, super busy around the Christmas time, but they were quite helpful of sending me sort of samples of what the bike's going to look like. It's still hard to imagine what the bike looks like, even if they kind of send you the pictures and stuff, but I think it turned out quite well. There's a few things that I've made different from your sort of your typical graphics set, because they had options that I wanted to try out, and now it's not very obvious and it's hard to see on camera. But typically when you have these graphics sets, they use a white base material, just white, and then they print the color on top, and then there is some kind of sort of finish on it, a gloss or matte finish. In this case, it is actually a silver, so it's just a glossy silver that they've used, and then they put the color on top, and then you can pick a glossy finish or matte finish. I went for the matte finish, so it has a slight sort of silvery touch to it, especially the orange looks nice when the sun shines on it. So I wanted to try that out. It's sort of the most expensive option they have, but I wanted to try it out and see what it looks like. So the customizations I've made, all of the graphics are basically custom made. They had something similar, so I said, I wanted something similar. Most of what they do, I think, for graphics are smaller single cylinder bikes, these sort of motocross bikes, and then they have a few sort of for the larger adventure bikes. I don't think they have all the adventure bikes, it's mostly KTM. But yeah, I wanted the Moto vibes and the Moto vibes logo on the back. That was pretty cool. Also, I thought I would have a bit more silver in there, because that's something I couldn't really see in the mock-up. It turned out to be more of a grayish color. I like it now, but that's something I wasn't quite sure how this is going to turn out. When it comes to installing graphics kit, now I have installed a few now, so I'm not saying well, it is easy. It's actually not that difficult to do once you've done it once, but the first time is a little, you don't want to mess it up, so it appears difficult. It's just a patience game, really. You just have to take your time. So there's a few methods you can put these graphics on. The recommendation from Scrubdesignz is to use the dry method. So you just, take a sticker and take half of sort of the back part off and start sticking it onto the bike. That's not what I used, especially for the larger panels. I use the so-called wet method. So you use a mix of, I think it's water, ethanol, tiny bit of dish soap, and then you spray both sides, and then you put it on the bike. And that helps, because if it's sort of crooked, you can still take it off really easily and sort of readjust it. And especially for the larger panels, that was very helpful. It takes a bit longer, but it's a much cleaner install. So I've used that for most of the larger pieces on the bike. Takes at least half a day to do that. I think it was a bit more to take. I took all the panels off, by the way. The other thing to mention is that the sort of base panels here, they're white on the R model, and this part here that's black, that is orange on the latest version, on the 2024. So I've used panels from the S model. So I bought panels from the S model and used those as a base material. I had these from my previous bike on the 2022. I don't know if you remember that, but they had blue panels, and the blue panels is not a very good base color to use because some of the color still shines through. So I needed something more neutral, and that's from the S model, in case you're interested. So one of the first things that everyone changes on the bike is the exhaust. This is a slip-on exhaust, the Aero. I had that on the 2022 model. And at the time I switched from a Krapovic to Aero. A Krapovic makes exhausts for this bike. They're quite expensive. They're definitely north of €1,000, so that's almost ridiculous. They also don't sound as good for some reason. Typically the Krapovic are pretty good, also sound-wise. So I decided for Aero. So price, sound was one thing. The third reason was that this is a titanium finish, and the black one that I had before, the black Krapovic on the other bikes, that paint comes off so easily, and that kind of looks messy. I knew I was going to ride the bike off-road, so it falls on its side. At least the titanium part will be fine. There's still this carbon heat shield on here, so there's small little scratches on there from my previous faults. I tend to not drop the bike as much anymore as I used to when I started riding off-road. So yeah, this Aero came from my 2022 model on this 2024. Now let's talk about something really exciting, and that's the Lone Rider Moto lights. I started collaborating with Lone Rider last year. They sent me a full luggage setup and the tent when I went on my Iceland trip, and that's how we started collaborating. There was a nice, I didn't even ask them for it. They sent me these, which is really nice. So yes, these have been given to me by Lone Rider. When they first came out, I mean, they're pretty good with their social media and announcing their products and stuff. Obviously I had my eye on these. They look fantastic. They've got this nice sort of orange halo around it. You can change the color of that. So it looked pretty cool. I was a bit concerned about the size. I mean, these are massive lights. So if you remember my previous bike, I had the SW Mototek fog lights, and they've made it from the very first S model all the way to my last model. So through 3 iterations basically. And they kind of sit down here a little bit. With these big lights, one of my biggest concerns was because of the size is where do I put them? Now there's different places you can mount them. If you know Denali lights, I guess they're the biggest competitor. They've been on the market for quite some time. They make lights in that size, and they have sort of different brackets for this bike. And I bought some because I thought I could use them and change them up a bit, but it tends to put the lights somewhere up here and they stick out too far. I wasn't quite happy with it. In the end, I went with the sort of standard mounting package that comes with the Moto lights, and they mount to the crash bar of the bike. I tried to mount them as far to the inside as possible, because if I do drop the bike, I still intend to ride this bike off-road. But if it falls on the side, it's still a close hit. There is a chance that the light may get hit. We'll see about that, but I tried to move it in as far as I could. And of course they're lower, so if there's any kind of rocks flying up, there's a chance that it hits the front glass of it. I do a separate review on the lights, but they're awesome. Also, the installation, just in short, was really, really easy. I thought this was going to be pain to install, but this has been sort of the easiest light setup that I've installed on the bike. Anyway, I'm quite excited to have these. I'm not much of a nighttime rider so far, and one of the reasons is because you can't see anything. With these lights, I'm actually quite excited to ride in the night. I've tried them out just a couple of times, so I haven't been riding much on this bike, but I'm quite curious now how it is when I ride in the dark. These put out an insane amount of light. It's absolutely crazy. The other ones that I had, that was nice, but this is just 10 times more what it feels. It just turns night into day. Anyway, really excited about these. Also that they fit in so nice with the bike. Thank you, Lone Rider. Let's stay low on the bike and talk about the wrap on the crash bars. Now that's a cheap change that I've made. I started wrapping the crash bars when I changed from the S model to the R model, and the main reason was because the crash bars, they got so scratched from my off-road riding and my road crashes that I still wanted to use them. They were still good to use, but they kind of looked bad. So that was one way to sort of fix the cosmetics of it. Now these are brand new crash bars, but they protect the crash bars as well. So, you know, not from a crazy road crash, but if you just tip the bike over on dirt and there's little rocks and stuff, it protects the paint a little bit. Also, it was an easy way to change the color. Didn't really like the orange crash bars on the bike with all the black going on. I had it orange at first and I just didn't like the look of it. So it's pretty easy to change the color with this. Also, I made a change this time. I used to have, I think there was 2.5 centimeters wide nylon band. I think I used 4 centimeters, so it's about that wide. It's much easier to wrap it because there's more overlap that you have. And the previous ones, I uninstalled the crash bars, put the wrap on for this. They stayed on the bike and it was quite easy. So if you use wider nylon, I had, I think a 10-meter roll, and I would just cut pieces off and then just do the sections of it, and then just use black tape and wrap it around. So it was quite easy to do and quite fast this time around. So if you're interested, yeah, that's the wrap modification. That's pretty cheap. Let's stay low still. The foot pegs, also something I first installed on my first R model, I think. These are, I don't think they're brand name ones. I tried different ones. I tried the PowerPods one from KTM. They still sit in my garage, unused. I tried them once. These wider, longer ones are aluminum ones. They work really well. I don't even like the rubber inserts anymore because the feel that you get, or that you don't have anymore, the sort of the connection to the bike is much more solid with these. Also, the wider platform makes it so much easier to stand on the bike, especially when you have sort of extended off-road riding. So really, really like the foot pegs. Also in black, they look much nicer and fit in, but of course they have scratches because I've used it before. But I've taken over these footrests from my first R, I think. Also, something I've used for my S model even is the sort of the shift lever here. It looks a little beaten up, so next time around I'll probably have to get a new one. But this one has that little flippy thing, so if the bike falls on its side, it's not gonna break off. It hasn't broken off, and I've taken spare parts along on the longer rides just in case one of these levers breaks off. It hasn't happened yet. So, and one of the reasons is because it kind of flips to the side if it does hit a rock or something. So it made it on here. So these look a little used on a brand new bike, but I like the parts. So I had to come back onto this bike again. Let's talk about these mirrors really quick. These are made by Touratech. This is the second pair I have because I dropped the first pair that was on my 2018 Super Adventure S model. I dropped these on the floor and the glass kind of jumped out. All the off-road riding, since I started riding off-road, they didn't do much damage to them. I mean, they looked a little beaten up, but they didn't really do enough damage that I would have to get a new pair. But I had to get a new pair now because the glass is broken. These are Touratech, I'm not sure what they're called, but they're relatively affordable. I think like 30 euros per side. And they kind of flick out of the way, which is really cool. I usually leave them out if the bike falls. They just move out of the way and they don't break. Let's talk about the handguards and clutch and brake lever. I think that makes sense to talk about them together because there's sort of two different ways of going about what you do with a handguard lever combination. Now, one way of doing it is you keep your OEM levers, these long ones. They're quite brittle. I think they have to be to a certain point because they need to sort of break off before they damage anything else. And if you have those, you want handguards that are relatively solid. So if the bike falls over, the forces don't transfer to the levers. I don't really like those for many reasons. Weight is one of them, but they're pretty rigid, and if you have something so rigid, and the bike is one of the first points where the bike hits the ground is sort of your handlebars, and with these sort of sturdy ones, it's very easy to bend your handlebar. So if you have sort of handguards that have a little bit more give, it takes the impact away. But of course that puts the lever in the danger of sort of breaking off. So what I have are levers that flip up like this, and these have been on my very first 1290 Super Adventure S model, the very first one. So they have easily 100,000 kilometers on them. They've seen the dirt quite often and they've never failed me, which is really cool. So that's one function. They also are adjustable in sort of length, how long the lever is. So if you're using 2 fingers on the clutch and you want that lever to be a bit shorter, like in my case, I had it to the shortest setting, and also the distance to the handlebars is something you can change on the fly. So that's the combination I've used now. The handguards, these are made by Touratech. They are a lot more sturdy than the original ones, especially the original ones on this model. The previous model, the predecessor, had handguards that were okay. I mean, I crashed them a few times until I broke them. These are a bit more sturdy. I'm sure there's a point when these will also break. So far they haven't. So I had these on I think on the predecessor R model. So this is the third bike that these handguards are on. And so far I like them. So there's 2 more things up on the front I want to talk to you about, and that's the phone mount that I have. Now, this is something that I've changed now from the previous one. I actually had this on the last bike too. Last year, I think in the summer of last year, beginning of the season, I think I changed this. For the longest time, I had a Touratech, is it called iBracket mount. So you didn't need to change the iPhone case and put in the bracket. But the problem is every time I change phones, which is usually every 2 years, you have to get the right size bracket to it. And it's quite a massive setup. And I decided to go for something lighter. This is SP Connect. I think the next better known product is Quadlock. It's very similar from the setup. I prefer the SP Connect for several reasons. One is that the actual mount is much smaller and sleeker on the bike than the sort of relatively large Quadlock mount. Also, the case for the phone is much slimmer. It's a slimmer profile, and I looked at it side by side because I have friends that have the Quadlock, the other ones have SP Connect, so I could check them out. So for me, SP Connect was the better option. I used the vibration isolated mount. They actually told me at, was it EICMA, I think, not last year, the year before, when I talked to a few guys, they said on the newer phones it's not so necessary as it was on the previous phones. I still got it anyway, and also it has the sort of charging built in. There's a little cable comes out that charges the phone, which is really cool. Like that a lot. The only disadvantage that has over the Quadlock system is that you have to decide the orientation. The phone mounts sort of in horizontal mode on the bike, because otherwise I can't see the large display. I think Quadlock, you can change that on the fly if it sits sort of vertically or horizontally. It's not a big deal. It's just something that you need to consider if you're looking at 2 options. But I like the SP Connect, and it's been quite good. I also had it off-road. It's quite a secure mount for me, and the vibration dampening, it's not something that irritates me when I'm reading the screen off. So that's quite good. The navigation unit that I have on here, the GPS unit, this is a Garmin ZumoXT. When I initially started out with the 1290 Super Adventure S from 2018, I think I still had a BMW unit because it's coming off a BMW, and I used the BMW cradle and put the sort of Navigator 5, I think it was called at the time, on there. I replaced this thing a while back, and the ZumoXT has been a much better unit. There's a lot of improvements I could make to a Garmin unit, but at the moment it is for a dedicated navigation unit is probably the best thing out there, even though it has a lot of flaws. And yeah, it's easy mounted. I just use the standard mount to mount it here. You can get mounts that lock the navigation unit if you want to. Didn't want to bother with that. This works fine for me, and it doesn't look like it should be very solid. It is actually. It's never really come off. Easy to mount. The other thing that transferred from the very first model that I had is this, I'll just take this off, is this GPS holder. KTM makes one. It's made out of plastic. This one is aluminum milled. It's a little bit more expensive. I think it was just over 100 euros. I think the original power part from KTM, the plastic one, is 80 or 90 or something. I'm not sure if they still sell this one. I looked on the website. They don't sell it for this model. It was sold for the previous model, but it fits the same. So no changes made, and it fits exactly the same. It's by a company called Schaal. Schaal mounts, German company. I don't know if they still sell it because I've had it now for so long, and it's really cool. It's a really, really sturdy setup. Let's talk about the windscreen. Now the windscreen is always, I guess, a big deal. Depends on how tall you are. You can try to find the perfect one. I found the windscreen of the S model that's about the size of this thing here quite good, and I had that on the 2022 model. And then I wanted something smaller, and so I used a racing screen made by the same company, WRS, and I had a racing screen on there. Used it in Iceland, and then it was so windy that one day that the bike tipped over and it broke it broke the windshield. Then I got a touring screen like this one here for the rest of the season, and I took it to the Trans-Italia Marathon. Also broke this one. It's quite brittle. When it falls on the side, it's really easy to break this one. So it broke. Unfortunately, so I had two of those last year, and then this is the third one that I have, the touring screen. Now I'll be riding a lot on the road this season, at least for the beginning of the season before I go into off-road riding again. So I wanted to have a taller windscreen. I think for longer distances, for higher speeds, for on-road touring, I prefer a taller windscreen. Like I said, the S model would have been fine. This one is about a few centimeters taller than the S model, so it's a little taller. I also like the smoke design. It kind of fits now with the rest of the bike, which is quite cool. So I went back to WRS and bought my third one of the windscreen. I wouldn't get anything taller than this. But this is about the right size, and of course you can adjust it, you know, with the standard adjustments. There's another few centimeters that you can bring up. This tends to be high enough even for fast motorway speeds. Let's talk about the rear luggage rack. This is made by Perun Moto, and it came off the 2022 model because it's bike specific. At the moment I have this, Touratech tailback on here, but it also has the mounting points for my Peli case where I have the drones in there. There's a couple of drones in there with a quick release system. The quick release is actually made by Mototek. And I take these bolts off if I'm using the Lone Rider Overlander bag, which sits flat on this luggage rack. So this luggage rack's been quite useful because it has plenty of mounting points and it's quite versatile. So of course I had to come back on this 2024 model. One more thing I almost forgot, it's a Supersprox rear sprocket. The inside is anodized aluminum, so it looks kind of cool, that orange, and then the outside is some kind of a steel. I had the Supersprox on previous bikes, just adds a little bling to the bike. It's not really necessary, but I kind of like the look of it. So last but not least, there's one piece of accessory here that I said came onto the bike that I'm not entirely happy with, and that's the Outback Mototek bash plate that came on the bike. So obviously this is bike specific, so it was off the 2022 model. And what I really like about Mototek, Outback Mototek, is that they're the only ones that make a bash plate that doesn't connect to the actual engine. So the original bash plate has mounts on the underside of the engine. So any of the other manufacturers, if it's Touratech, Mototek, you name them, they mount to the original OEM points, and that's basically on the underside of the engine. Now, I know that's not a very solid point to put a bash plate because, if you transfer any kind of force through it, and we had an incident happen on our last trip to the West Alps, where a little rock came onto the plastic on the S model. It's just a plastic splash guard on it, but that rock hit a small screw and that punctured the underside of the engine case, and it was just a small puncture. It was enough for oil to leak out. Luckily we were able to fix it on the spot, but it's something that can quickly end your trip. So I wouldn't trust those mounting points to take a lot of force and a lot of hit. So what Outback Mototek have done is they transfer that energy to the lower crash bars. There's a little bracket on here where the front part of the crash guard bash plate is sitting on the crash bars, and the rear part of it sits where the footrests are. So it removes the necessity of using the engine as a mounting point. I think that's great. The thing that isn't great is the fact that little mounting bracket here, the welds that they've used is just little sort of spot welds, and there should have been a proper strong weld. It actually came off, and I think I've only used it in the Enduro Park one time. And the weld broke, and it broke on both parts, which means the rear mounting points are gone, and then that plate just falls down. Luckily it was very close to home, but I was basically dragging that bash plate across the street. So that was quite annoying, and when I looked at it, and you can see that, wasn't manufactured really well. It wasn't really done. It should have been a proper weld on there, and it wasn't. So they were kind enough to send me something new. So the customer support in that regard, they were good. They sent me something new, but it was the same problem. It was just a spot weld. That's not very robust. And so I used that, and again, it broke. And the next time I had it was, I think, for the Iceland trip. So I didn't make any changes to it, and I didn't hit anything in Iceland, but just the vibration alone on that trip was enough to break the weld points off again, which is super annoying. So the next time I didn't go to the customer service, I actually went to a metal shop and I asked them if they could put a proper weld on it. So they put a proper weld on it, and the part that was welded held up. So when I used it in the Trans-Italia Marathon, same year, last year, that weld held up, but another welding point broke on the same bracket, which is, again, and that looked decent, but it broke off. So that was a pain. So I had a few of those brackets, and the weld points broke. The bike that Stefan has, he has a 1290 Super Adventure R that I took to the Trans-Italia Marathon in 2023, and it's got the crash bars, it's got the bash plate, and even the upper crash bars, also from Outback Mototek. And then I considered actually buying these from him for my current model. And then we looked at the upper crash bars, and there were welds in there that were corroded, and they would just come off. So typically a weld, you have to have enough heat, and that the weld material actually combines with the carrier material in there, and it was just superficial, so it just came off. So that's a bit of a shame. It's still a good design, I think. That's why I still have it on here. So the bracket that I have on here now, again, I went to the metal shop and had another proper weld on it so I could use it. But it's a bit of a shame because the design is great. I like the design. So hopefully they must have known this by now and have to figure it out. I haven't actually had the chance to actually tell the manufacturer that. I mean, there must have been others that had the same issue. So that's a bit of a accessory that good design, the execution leaves room for improvement, let's put it this way. All right, my new motorcycle for the 2025 season. If you have any questions to the accessory or modifications I've made, put them in the comment section. I'm definitely going to be very excited to keep riding this bike. It has less than 400 kilometers on the clock at the moment, hasn't even seen the first service. I have a lot of tourist plans for the season, so there's going to be a lot of kilometers on this bike by the end of the season. I hope to see some of you guys on the road. If I don't, have a great season. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, ride safe and stay awesome.